Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to be reading from Canto 1, chapter 13 to 15. Last time we had a bit of an episode technical problem that we couldn't go through some of that, but we're going to get into this. And last time we had a wonderful Q&A. So I just want you to know I love your questions and please keep them coming in. Put them in the chat, put them in the comments, put them wherever you are, and I'd love to hear from you. So let's keep it alive. All right. So today I have some thoughts for you that I want to share. And these thoughts are around the existence of God and the world we've created. You know, the fact of the matter is that I want to really pose this question. Have we created a better world around God, or did we create a better world around science? Now, of course, when I say the word God, you're going to think about religion. And the problem with religion is it killed millions of people and brought about a great havoc to our planet. So we went about creating a better system, a better world, and we rejected religion. And we created a world without religion, a world based on empirical science and the development of material technologies. And I in no way am trying to dismiss them, but I am going to point out some of the blind spots and some of the consequences that we're facing. You know, like everything has its positive and its negative, so I don't want to talk of only, and the problem is that everyone talks about the positive things that we gained through this shift. This shift occurred around 300 years ago. I think the 17th century is roughly where the turning point was. And as we fled the world of religious dogma, unfortunately, we created a world of scientific dogma. Again, don't get me wrong. It is not that I have something against science or technology or all the wonderful things that they have created. Absolutely wonderful. I am not against that at all. But we need to balance the scales and talk about the effects and look at things a little objectively. So I'm going to speak from that perspective. A little bit of balancing happening on what happened on the negative side. So the problem is that as we embarked on a mad race to conquer, control, and tame nature, we ended up creating a lot of problems, and now we're at a place where it seems like nature's out to get us. You know, like all the environmental problems we're seeing, and the rise of population and food supply and shortages that I think were around the corner for us now in many ways, that are going to turn our world upside down. And although we've created great machines and we've done wonderful things on that front, but we've also polluted the earth and in many ways destroyed the planet. There's been a plus and a minus, a positive and a negative. We've created incredible technologies, artificial intelligence and robots, but our human beings are losing their minds. I'll go over some of the research with you, but in short, just to let you know, about 50% of people in the US are diagnosed with mental illness or disorder at some point in their lives. This is sad. And there is a reason for this, and that reason is very, very clear. We have ignored the development of this technology, human technology, in favor of material technology. If we'd kept a balance on both, it would be a different story, but we didn't. So the proposal here is, for all of you, is that we're turning to the ancient past to learn from the wisdom of great souls and the legacy they left behind in the form of the Vedas, to guide us in these troubled times. Keep in mind that God is not a religion, and because someone believes in religion, it doesn't mean that they understand the nature of God. God has no religion and cannot be known by religion. And let's begin our exploration from that understanding. So let me go over some of the facts about what I said earlier. Yes, people were killed by religion, millions of people in fact. But it is said that out of, I don't know, I've got some of these statistics that out of 1,763 wars, only 123 were classified to involve a religious cause, accounting for less than 7% of all wars and less than 2% of all people killed in warfare. I mean, I too have been sort of hearing this thing around that religion is killed millions of people and is the primary cause of warfare and suffering in the world, but there are some statistics that don't agree with that. So I think there may be some skewed and imbalanced perceptions rather. Just for a simple thing, it is said that about 3 million people were killed during the Crusades and perhaps 3,000 during the Inquisition. But if you look at World War I, which is completely secular, completely senseless, politically driven, 35 million people died during that time, and about 75 million during World War II. So, there is the politics and so many other factors have also played a huge role in the destruction of life on this planet. Essentially, it's about human nature. Human beings take religion and pollute it. Human beings take science and pollute it. Human beings take political systems and pollute them. Wonderful political systems were created, and then they were exploited by human beings, either to control people. You take a theory like Marxism, which is about trying to help people, and then you give it in the hands of a Stalin or a Mussolini, and then you see them, or Hitler for that matter, and see them wreak havoc on people. You take capitalism, and then you put that in the hands of greedy corporations, and you see what we're facing today. So it's a world full of contradictions of all different kinds. The research is definitely on that a large part of the world, because of all the propaganda against religion, has turned away against religion and turned against God, as if the two were synonymous. And that's the big mistake we make. From what I find out, Pew Research surveys that were done in 2012 show that about 1.1 billion people, or 16% of the planet, are religiously unaffiliated. Of course, that means that they're atheists of some kind. And what are they into? What are they following? Well, because everybody believes in something. Nobody believes in nothing. So what they believe in is a science, and the science that is based on empiricism. What is empiricism? It is knowledge that is derived from sense experience, and only experience and observation will form the basis of that science. And I would love to hear discussion from some of our scientists in the community, and I would love to hear if they've got some different take on this, because I'm finding myself looking at the outcome of this science and feeling we took another road and it led us down another pathway of all kinds of problems. We might be now coming up with AI and robots, but look at what's happened with humans. I told you earlier that about 50% of humans in the US will be diagnosed with mental illness or disorder at some point in their life. Globally, it's about 11% of the population, around almost 1 billion people. But it's a lot. And the answer can be found in the Vedic wisdom. Why has that happened? Yes, I'll take one, of course, contemporary answer, and that is the fact that, yes, people have turned away from God and religion and so on and so forth because of its, the misdeeds and mishaps that it has engaged in ways it's tried to control people and frighten people and all that kind of rubbish that it's done. But if you look at Vedic times, there was something very important they did at that time, and that is they trained every child in meditation. They trained every child in learning how to respect and honor nature, and how to develop humility and compassion and kindness, and learn to exist with all kinds of people, going beyond race and gender and all kinds of discrimination. These factors, if we raise populations based on such thinking, then we will have a wonderful planet. But the way we're doing it right now, we see different communities living in different parts of the city, whites and blacks not really getting along, discrimination against people who've come from a different country. But the fact of the matter is, who hasn't come from a different country? There are no natives of America, for that matter, except for the people who were indigenous, Native Americans. Other than that, everybody's an immigrant out here. But you look at how they treat each other, how we treat each other is pathetic. How we treat one country to another, how we deal with each other is just sad. Why is that? Because our egos have been allowed to be made the most prominent. And what does the ego say? The ego says, I'm the best. I'm the greatest. My country is the greatest. I am the greatest. My nationality is the greatest. My religion is the greatest. My way is the greatest. That's what the ego is always telling us. And because of that, we're stuck in this, inexorable sort of treadmill of trying to create peace and then coming back to war and destruction and havoc and chaos. It's a sad cycle. So the best we can do, you and I, is to understand these things and to make our spiritual journey our top priority. It's not enough to talk about the problem. We need to look at the solution. And the solution is with us. The solution is in being able to do a better job in our own lives, to find an inner peace, to find an inner shelter in ourselves and with God. So let's explore that idea. What if we took God away from religion? You know how they say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But what if you took the baby out of the bathwater, right, and looked at God from a more objective viewpoint? Then you'd come up with the idea that there is something that is behind the creation, something that designed it, something that is a greater power than ourselves, because we certainly don't know how to design human bodies or the cells that are in them or planets or any of this stuff. And because these things are so complex, every bit of it, even down to the DNA, is so incredibly complex. I read somewhere that there are 3 billion bits of information within one particle of DNA, which is atomic in size. So much information in such a tiny submolecular particle. Again, if I'm getting anything scientifically wrong, please correct me, but that's what I understand. Within that, so much data, so much information that by that data it determines what kind of hair you'll have, what kind of nose, face, shape. Everything is determined by that little bit of that tiny infinitesimal particle of DNA. And nobody created that, but our phones and our houses and our cars. This was created by great people, by great scientists, by great researchers, by thousands and millions of people collaborating together. But this planet, nobody created it. It just happened. It was a big bang, and that was all. Really? You want me to buy that story and that mythology? Prove it. I tell anyone who is in that field and believes in the Big Bang, prove it. Show me a Big Bang in which worlds are created. Okay, forget worlds. A human is created. Okay, forget humans. An insect is created. One mosquito, please. Anything. A drop of milk, maybe. Big Bang, and there it is. No, can't do it. Because it's not replicable, because it's not scientific, because it's a mythology. It's another story. Just like the scientists accuse religion, similarly, their theories, which are based on, yes, projections, based on all kinds of projections, based on all kinds of interpretations of data that they're able to gather, but they're also with a bias. And if one cannot see one's own bias, then one is going to be very limited in one's thinking. So that's just my little take on that. Let's begin the Bhagavatam. And today we're going to look at the death or the passing of Krishna. It's a very intense topic. There's a lot to learn. And I'm going to dive into it. So, meanwhile, do feel free to write down the things that come to your mind. And we're starting off with Chapter 13, Dhritarashtra quits home. Okay. So you know this part, right? That there was a big battle, the battle of the Mahabharata. And in that battle, literally millions of soldiers were killed. So this is where this all begins. And after that battle, or rather that battle was being witnessed by the king Dhritarashtra. We're going to talk about him today quite a bit. The blind king. And he was witnessing, the whole thing was being witnessed by Sanjaya, who was sitting at his feet over there. And he was witnessing the entire speaking of the Bhagavad Gita. And that speaking of the Bhagavad Gita, then we've done a whole series on that, the entire book. And yeah. So then after that, everybody came back to Indraprasth, which is now New Delhi. Beautiful city that had been created by King Yudhishthir. So King Yudhishthir now was ruling, and at that point, everybody returned from the battle and there was peace. Yudhishthir had won his kingdom, and he was reigning peacefully in cooperation with his younger brothers, and they were witnessing the birth of his grandson, Parikshit, who was predicted to be a worthy heir. Now, during this time of peace, Vidura, who was the younger brother of the blind king, remember King Dhritarashtra, who I was just talking about. So the younger brother of Dhritarashtra had been on pilgrimage during this entire time, during the battle. And when he returned, Vidura was greeted with great affection. They had him, they hugged him, everybody had missed him so much. And after he'd eaten, they had him rest, and then they asked about his travels. And after going through all of that, he sat privately with his brother Dhritarashtra, the blind king, and he started speaking with him about leaving home. Now remember, Dhritarashtra is a king. And Vidura, his brother, his younger brother, is telling him it's time to leave home. And this is what he says. He says, whoever is under the influence of supreme time, Kala, must surrender his most dear life. Right? All of us have to die at some point. So we are all under the influence of time. And no one can escape that influence of time. So he says, we must surrender our dear life to time. And what to speak of other things means we also have to surrender everything else, our wealth, our honor, our children, our land, our home, everything. So Vidura continues, your father, brother, well-wishers, and sons are all dead and passed away. So Dhritarashtra was the father of Duryodhan. Duryodhan was the cause of that war that had taken place. Millions of people, including all of Dhritarashtra's sons, had died. So Vidura is telling Dhritarashtra, he says, your father, brother, well-wishers, and sons are all dead and have passed away. You yourself have expended the major portion of your life. Your body is now overtaken by invalidity, and you are living in the home of another. After all, the people that Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhana had fought with, the Pandavas, they had now won the battle. They were in charge. And Dhritarashtra was living at their mercy. Vidura continued, you've been blind from your very birth, and recently you've become hard of hearing. By the way, this blindness thing is really interesting, that Dhritarashtra was blind from birth. It's very symbolic, and it's very significant. He was blind physically, but he was also blind because of his attachments to his son, Duryodhana. And even though his son was engaged in adharma and doing so many wrong things, the father could not speak against his son. That son of his was a bully, he was powerful, he was strong physically, and in every way wanted to rule the kingdom. And was willing to do anything it took to do that. Doesn't matter, right or wrong. He was willing to engage in any activity so long as he would win. He was really a tyrant, Duryodhana. But the father, knowing that, could not stand up to his son, could not tell his son. And even though the father was the king, Dhritarashtra, could not stand up to his son. So he was blind in many ways, blind in terms of his intelligence, blind in terms of his vision, blind in terms of his power and where to exercise it, blind in terms of his attachment. In so many ways, he was blind. And then, of course, Vidura goes on, now you have become hard of hearing, your memory is shortened, and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog, and are eating remnants of food given by Bhima. Bhima and the Pandavas had been the victors of the war. And now the king was living at their mercy. And so his brother continues, there is no need to live a degraded life and subsist on the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poisoning. You also insulted their wife and usurped their kingdom and wealth. Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that this body is like a garment, and that just as our garments become old, we give up these garments and we get new ones. Similarly, the soul gives up an old and useless body and takes on a new one. And that a self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. So, in many ways, Vidura is bringing up that same analogy out here. He then continues, telling blind King Dhritarashtra, he says, a person who is called undisturbed, who goes to an unknown place, remote place, and freed from all obligations, quits his material body when it has become useless. Such a person is truly a first-class human being who awakens and understands, either by himself or from others, the falsity and misery of this material world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on God, residing within his heart. Please, therefore, leave for the north immediately. North is where the Himalayas are, the mountains. And without letting your relatives know, for soon that time will approach which will diminish the good qualities of all humans. That time meaning the time of Kali Yuga, which is coming 5,000 years ago. They were predicting that it will come, and we are in it now. So he tells him, a first-class person is one who understands, either by himself or from others, the falsity and misery of this world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on God residing within his heart. So does that mean that you and I should leave our homes and go to the forest or the mountains and because we understand the falsity and misery of this world? No. There are things we need to do right now. And that, I hope, when you think of the things you need to do, that doing goes beyond just survival. Everyone will survive, even the animals survive, the plants survive. We need to think beyond survival. What does it mean to think beyond survival? It means to be able to think about how can I serve, how can I contribute, how can I make some kind of difference in the community, the world, the people around me. Even if it's one person that you can impact, even if it's a person at your work. How can I impact in a way that I can contribute to making a difference here? Now, it needs to be also said equally clearly that none of us is going to change the world, and none of us is going to save the world, and none of us is going to be able to transform what is happening here. Many people speak like that, but I would like to point out to them that the greatest of souls have come on this planet, from Krishna and Buddha and Christ, and they have attempted to do great, wonderful things. But the world is still a mess. They have not been able to save the world, right? People might think they are saved. I don't know how saved they are. But whatever it is that you believe, the fact of the matter is the world is a mess. It has been all these years, and no one has been able to save the world. So yes, but we can contribute to our personal growth, and we can contribute to the growth of anyone around us who is ready for that. meaning that they're ready, because each person has to make their choice personally, cannot be imposed on anyone, and you cannot get people to go there through fear. There needs to be a seeking, a longing, a desire to want to know what's going on out here. Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? And to such people, yes, one can speak. Call them on this meetup, this gathering that we have here every Tuesday, or talk to them yourself and share with them what you've learned. But keep in mind that this is important, to do what you need to do for survival, but also to contribute in any way that you can, whether that way is through words, or whether that way is by giving love, or whether that way is by spreading kindness, or in whatever way that you are in the world, contributing to that world, right? So that's just a little piece of information that might help us, because otherwise it can be taken very out of context. So he's saying that when a person realizes this at a certain time, at a certain age, then yes, one should. So that was the whole system at that time. The Vedic culture is that there would be a time when a person would leave home. It was called sannyas. Sannyas was a time when you realize, okay, my kids are grown up, my business of the world is handled, and then I need to start gradually stepping away. First they would do vanaprastha, which was stepping away for a little while, going to places of pilgrimage. As you retire, gradually starting to detach from the worldly attachments. And then from there, gradually at some point, leaving everything and devoting one's life to God completely. So that is the system that was there in the Vedic times. It was a society based around self-realization and spiritual awakening. And so that's why it's so important to learn from them. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, his wife Gandhari, and Vidura, the brother, left for the Himalayas overnight without telling anyone. In the morning, Yudhishthir, who was the king at that point now, and the eldest brother of the Pandavas who had won the battle of Kurukshetra, in the morning Yudhishthir discovered that they were missing and began to feel guilty that perhaps they had left because of him. He remembered how they had taken care of him and his brothers. This is very shocking, this statement, so I just kind of want you to hear this. And he says, they were always our good well-wishers, ignoring all the pain and suffering he and his family had suffered. I don't know if you've experienced this, but there are two kinds of people. I don't know if there's two kinds of people, but there's two different kinds of people in this context. One, the smallest slight you do to them, they will take it and remember it for the rest of their lives, and they will do whatever they can to get back at you or punish you or hurt you or whatever they can do. They're vindictive in that sense. And then there are people like Yudhishthir who are good at heart, kind, compassionate, loving. And no matter how much they've been hurt by others, they continue to see that which is best in them. It has been said in the Bhagavatam at some place where it says, it is the quality of the wise to see that which is best in others, that which is good in others, and overlook their flaws. And if you want to develop real compassion, if you want to develop real kindness, that quality is vital. If we are only going to look at people's flaws and their mistakes and their wrongdoings, then we will be sucked in by that energy, and we will develop the energy of hate, or we will develop the feelings of disappointment or disillusionment or anger or fear or whatever else. But we will not rise and elevate our consciousness. To do that, we need to stay focused, as Yudhishthir is, on that which is good in others. It's not about being positive. He was fully aware about all the stuff that his, that his cousins and his uncle and his, all these people had done. But he was not willing to let that drag him down. He was not willing to let the misdeeds of others pollute his consciousness. It's so important, because people will do all kinds of things. They may try to hurt us. They may try to condemn us. They may try to judge us. If we now fall into that same vibration and start to judge them, and we start to make, do as they are doing, then how are we any better than they? How are we any different from them if we do exactly what they're doing? Keep that in mind. It's very important to know. Do better. Always keep that in mind. Do better. Don't do to others what they do to you. Right? If they do good to you, then if someone does good to me, I'll do good to them. But if they harm me, I'm going to harm them. I'm going to show them. I'm going to make them suffer. I'm going to make them pay. That's the mentality of someone who is completely disconnected from their soul and from God. A truly godly person is compassionate. Whether they believe in a God or not doesn't matter. But that point is, that's the quality of the wise. That is the quality that we need to look for. Right? So it doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what you live. To believe is to be and to live. Right? So when you can be that and live that, all right, so Narada arrives, and Narada, the great sage, Narada arrives, and he says, do not lament for anyone, for everyone is under the control of God. As a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings people together and separates them. Now, if you think of God as the ocean, vast, and then if you think about how in that ocean everything is tossed here and there, right? Boats, ships, rivers come together, separated, right? Things come together and are separated. The ocean lands up in different places. So it's a much better analogy to start to think of what he's speaking about here in terms of the ocean. It might be a better way to understand that, rather than trying to think that, oh, God is personally trying to separate people and move them apart. And sometimes people say to their kids, they say, God took this person away from you. No, God doesn't personally do anything. God is not personally involved in the affairs of this world or of this universe. Everything's been set up to work a certain way. Everything is organized. That's not the way it works. A CEO of a company is not down there doing every little thing, but rather everything's been organized, streamlined to work effectively. So that's the deeper understanding of these statements. Then he continues, feelings of separation are due only to the illusory affection, only due to illusory affection and nothing more. Give up your anxiety due to ignorance of the self. You are now thinking about how they who are helpless, poor creatures, will exist without you. So yes, he is thinking that how will his uncle Vidura and Dhritarashtra, all his, these relatives of his, how will they manage without him? How will they exist? How will they be able to survive? But let's move on to what's going to happen next. Because they're on a journey now. He says, don't keep thinking that you're the one who is in charge of their life. And no, they are on their own journey now. And I think every parent and everyone who loves someone has to be willing to trust that when our loved ones leave, we need to be able to trust that they are on a journey that will gradually lead them to where they need to go. We need to trust them on that. It's very hard, very difficult, because we're attached, because we love them, because we care about them. And it's very hard to let go. So Narad continues, this material body made of 5 elements is already under the control of eternal time or kala, action or karma, and the modes of material nature or guna. How then can it, being already in the jaws of the serpent, protect others? Your body is already under the influence of time and the modes of nature. So actually we think we're so free, but in fact, we have very little freedom. We cannot stop aging. We cannot stop our mind. We cannot stop our heart or our body or do whatever. There's so many things that we are under the influence of. We can only see a certain spectrum, hear a certain spectrum, do a certain number of things. We cannot fly if we wanted to. We cannot There's just so many limitations upon us, and yet we think we can save someone from death, or we think we can save someone from suffering, but it's not possible. The reality is that everybody is on a journey of their own, and we need to be able to trust their path. In other words, we need to be able to trust God. We need to be able to trust life. We need to be able to trust the whole process of being here. So he continues, those who are devoid of hands are prey for those who have hands. Those who are devoid of legs are prey for the four-legged. The weak are the subsistence of the strong, and the general rule holds that one living being is food for another. So it's a very important part here that how one being preys on another. This is the way of life. And so it is sometimes thought by people, well, these animals, they're here for our enjoyment. They're there for us to eat. They're there for us to enjoy. But that's not actually the truth. The truth is that we, as human beings, are involved in karma. There is a reaction for our actions. Yes, within animals, there is no karma. If a lion eats a dog or another creature, there is no karma. But if a human kills some other creature, there is karma. And there is an impact for our actions, whether it's to another human being, another animal, or even to nature, or even to ourselves. There is a karmic effect. Every action for us has a reaction. We've been given intelligence, and we need to use that intelligence to discern. That intelligence is not given, this kind of intelligence, should I say, is not given to the animals. So he says here, therefore, one living being is food for another. So as human beings, because we are involved in the cycle of karma, we must reduce the level of harm or violence that we do to any other creature. We must be able to minimize the damage, and therefore it is recommended for human beings to not kill or eat each other or animals, and to try to live a simple life, to live with simple foods and simple things, so that you're not complicating your life. Your human body was not actually designed for eating animals. But if you have questions on that, I'll take it up. Then he continues, therefore, O king, you should look to the supreme God only, who is one without a second, and who manifests himself by different energies, and is both within and without. Right? God is within all of us, and is also everywhere in everything. That supreme Godhead, Sri Krishna, in the guise of all-devouring time, has now descended to the earth to eliminate the envious from the world. He has already performed his duties to help the demigods. So what had happened is the demigods had actually requested Krishna to come down because or to incarnate because they needed help. They said, we're not able to stop the kind of mayhem that is happening on this planet. There are so many people engaged in harming each other and harming the planet that we need this to stop. Something's got to be done. And so Krishna said, yeah, I know what. I have already scheduled this visit. I'm going to come and I'll take care of it. And so, yeah, because Krishna's coming is actually scheduled. Krishna is predicted as he will appear at a certain time in a certain place as well. And it's presented in the list of the avatars of Vishnu. So also is Buddha's coming predicted. And so also is Kalki at the end of the Kali Yuga, for his coming to destroy everything that is happening and everyone, and then restart and reset the whole planet on its journey back, reset it back to wholeness again. Your uncle, Narad says, Dhritarashtra, your uncle and his brother Vidura and his wife Gandhari have gone to the southern side of the Himalaya mountains, to Sapta Shrota, where the waters of the sacred Ganges divide into 7 branches, and where there are shelters of the great sages. Dhritarashtra is now engaged in Ashtanga Yoga by bathing 3 times daily, performing the Agnihotra sacrifice with fire and drinking only water. This helps one control the mind and the senses and frees one completely from thoughts of familial affection. So that's the concept of samadhi. And this is what Dhritarashtra was engaged in coming to that place of samadhi through different processes of the Ashtanga Yoga practice. Oh, this is back too. All right, wonderful. Yeah. One who has controlled the sitting posture through the yoga asanas and the breathing process can turn the senses towards the absolute reality and thus become immune to the contaminations of the modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, will have to amalgamate his pure identity, his soul, with intelligence and then merge into the supreme Brahman and rise to the spiritual sky. He will have to suspend all the actions of the senses, even from the outside, and will have to be impervious to the interactions of the senses. He will quit his body most probably on the 5th day from today, and his body will turn to ashes with the fire of mystic power, along with his wife. Vidura being affected with delight and grief. The brother, Vidura, being affected with delight. Why delight? Because he's delighted to see his brother finally release from himself, from this shell, this human body, and move into the spiritual realm. So being affected with delight and grief. Grief is also natural because we're losing someone who we've loved, who we've spent our life with. So Vidura being affected with delight and grief, will then leave that place of sacred pilgrimage. And now we come to perhaps one of the most difficult chapters to understand, and that is the disappearance of Sri Krishna. Now, in Vedic terminology, we don't talk of this as the death of someone. Death is actually considered to be a misnomer. There is no such thing as death. The sun rises and sets. The sun never dies. People appear and disappear from our lives. So even from their body, right? So we are born at a certain time. Our soul is not born. It's a very important piece to understand. Our soul is never born. We are never born and we never die. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, for one who is born, it is certain he will die, and one who dies is certain he will be born again. For the soul there is neither birth nor death, nor having once been does it ever cease to be. Then you say, once been? Wait a minute. Because in an earlier part he says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, and never will there come a time when we shall cease to be. So, essentially it means the soul is eternal. It appears into this body when we take birth, and it leaves this body when we die. And so we're going to learn about the disappearance of Sri Krishna. It's a beautiful scene we had come across earlier when Krishna was leaving the 5 brothers, the Pandavas, after the victory of the Battle of Mahabharat, and he was heading back to his kingdom, Dwarka. And then we talked about Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. And now the story continues from there. So Arjun had been missing. Arjun, who was there in the Bhagavad Gita. So he's the brother of the 5 Pandavas. He's one of the 5 Pandavas who were there in Hastinapur. So Arjun was missing Krishna, and he'd gone to Dwarka to see him. 7 months had passed. And they didn't have cell phones back then, and they didn't have all the ways of communication that we have now. So 7 months passed, and Yudhishthir, his elder brother, who was the king now, began to see inauspicious omens. He began to say, the left side of my body, my thighs, arms, and eyes are all quivering again and again. I'm having heart palpitations due to fear. All this indicates undesirable happenings. The rays of the sun are declining, and the stars appear to be fighting amongst themselves. Confused living entities appear to be ablaze and weeping. Rivers, tributaries, ponds, reservoirs, and the mind are all perturbed. Butter no longer ignites fire like ghee. What is this extraordinary time? What is going to happen? The deities in the temple seem to be crying, lamenting and perspiring. They seem about to leave. All the cities, villages, towns, gardens, mines, and hermitages are now devoid of beauty and bereft of all happiness. I do not know what sort of calamities are awaiting us now. He's sensing something very terrible is about to happen. Yudhishthir continues, he says he sees that the direction of eternal time has changed, and there were disruptions in seasonal regularities. The people in general had become very greedy, angry, and deceitful, and he saw that they were adopting foul means of livelihood. All ordinary transactions and dealings had become polluted with cheating, even between friends. And in familial affairs, amongst families, there was always misunderstanding now, between fathers, mothers, and sons, between well-wishers and brothers and sisters, even between husband and wife. There was always strain and quarrel. Suddenly, the entire environment of the world was starting to change. He had never seen this before. This wasn't the case. During the time of Yudhishthira, everything was beautiful, and now suddenly something is shifting. He's noticing that in the course of time, people in general had were becoming accustomed to greed and anger and pride. I think that all these earthly disturbances indicate some greater loss to the good fortune of the world. The world was fortunate to have been marked with the footprints of the lotus feet of Krishna. These signs indicate that this will no longer be. Yudhishthira began to worry that Krishna was getting ready to quit his earthly pastimes. It is from his causeless mercy on us that we have our kingdom and our good fortune, he said. At this time, Arjun returned. Now, Arjun, remember, was gone for 7 months, and now he returned suddenly. The king saw Arjun's dejection, which was unprecedented. He'd never seen him like that. Arjun's head was down, and tears were gliding from his eyes. Yudhishthira said to him, "My brother Arjun, please tell me whether your health is all right. You appear to have lost your bodily luster. Is this due to others disrespecting and neglecting you? Or is it that you are feeling empty for all time because you might have lost the most intimate friend, Krishna? Oh, my dear brother Arjun, I can think of no other reason for your being so dejected." I think with that we will wind up for today, and I'll take up some questions. Let me turn over to the questions that you all have been asking and see what we got here. So we're going to learn more about what happened to Krishna. Arjun is going to tell us about that. I had planned it for today, but I think with all the disruption that happened with all the technology, I'm going to have to keep it for the next time. So Cindy is asked, what do you think? Well, let me bring it out here, your question. It's a lovely question. What do you think is the meaning of a king born blind later to age with loss of power and continuing physical decline, eventually to shed his body? What was the purpose of blindness from the beginning, and how does it correlate, if at all? Actually, I'd spoken about that earlier, that the blindness of Dhritarashtra was really connected to his inability to see beyond his own attachments, beyond his own need, beyond his own child, beyond his own ego. And so really the lesson to take away from that is the blindness of that the ego actually puts us into. We all have an ego. And if we are identified with it, if we are attached to it, if we are attached to what it tells us, then chances are, like this blind king, we will engage in foolish acts that are not beneficial to us or others, that we will end up being caught up in the cycle of things that will unnecessarily harm us. For example, the ego might tell you, oh, this drug is so wonderful. It makes me feel high. It makes me feel good. And you might just get right into it. Or some other substances, smoking, or so many other things people have got caught up in. Why did they get caught up in that? Because they were blindly following their ego. So awakening means being able to understand that I am not my mind, I am not this body, I am not the ego, I am not the voices in my head, I am not any of this. I am not man or woman, I am not fat or thin, I am not smart or stupid. That's all the ego. I am something that is beyond all of that. I am the one that possesses a mind, a body. It is my ego. Who am I? So as you begin to understand that, you go deeper into understanding the real self. And the real self is clear always, and always acts from the place of well-being for you and for others. Is never there trying to harm you, is never there trying to engage in activities that would harm you. That is the beauty of being awake. So awake versus blinded. See the difference? We are blinded by our desires, blinded by our ego, blinded by our thoughts, blinded by all the things of the world. And we need to wake up. And the waking up is this, that none of this stuff matters. All of this stuff we will leave behind. All of this that we have in the world is futile. What matters is that spiritual growth. That's awakening. That's when you wake up and you understand, oh, this is what is important. And what does it mean? You see the world differently now. You actually begin to see things as they are, not as you would like them to be. One of our greatest causes of suffering is to see the world as we would like it to be, to think that people should do what we think they should do. Nobody's going to do what you think they should do. You can't control people, you can't control others, you can't control the world. So that kind of thinking comes from blindness. Let's see, Cindy, you've got some more good observations here. Perhaps the blindness, let me bring it out here, is analogous to the lack of perception of time. Therefore, Krishna tells him about boundaries of earthly life and the physical being. Yes. Yeah. Krishna wants him to understand the limitations of this life, to understand that, hey, it's good to be here, it's good to enjoy yourself, but don't make it the most important thing. Everything in its own time. So yes, no one's saying don't enjoy the world. Enjoy the world, but don't make it your goal of life. Understand that there is a greater goal beyond this world. So that is where we need to keep our attention and our focus at all time. Ultimately, as you see in the case of Dhritarashtra, and we'll come to learn of the Pandavas themselves, leaving their home, leaving everything they have to be able to pursue their connection with God and to pursue that higher purpose of life. And that is true for all of us. So thank you so much for your questions. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. And I do appreciate all your inquiry and your questions. You say that blindness is ignorance of the ego. Yep, exactly. And that is the true takeaway from here. Do not be blinded by your ego and what it wants and what it desires, but rather be able to bring yourself to look within in that peaceful, calm state of mind, because only then will you see things as they are. Otherwise, your desires, your ego, your wounding, all of that stuff, because that's all from the ego, will color your perception. And you may think, oh, I'm not physically blind. No, but you are spiritually blind. If you are allowing all of this mental concoction to take your attention away. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Sorry about all the technical problems we've been having last time and this time, but I hope that will pass, as all things do. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. See you next week.